Welcome to the Kyiv Post podcast, a weekly roundup of interviews with our journalists who cover the ins and outs of Ukraine day in and day out. I'm Josh Kovensky, a staff writer here. The long arm of the law, but in Ukraine, maybe the arm is not long enough. Staff writer Oleg Sukhov joins us now to discuss. So first of all, Oleg, why was this a failure?
So basically, judicial reform was supposed to cleanse the judiciary and to restore trust in the judiciary, and that goal has not been achieved. So one reason is that because 25 judges with a very controversial reputation, some who participated in political cases, others whose assets do not match their income, also judges who are accused of corruption, judges whose rulings have been recognized either as political or as illegal by Ukrainian and European courts. So these 25 judges were appointed last week to the new Supreme Court. So basically, the High Council of Justice, which is the main judicial body, ignored vetoes imposed on these judges by the Public Integrity Council, which is a civil society watchdog, which was created under this reform. So that's the main point.
And so you, say that Poroshenko specifically sabotaged it. Can you go into why that's the case and how that was accomplished?
So Poroshenko, as far as I understand, he wanted it to look good. He wanted it to be superficially transparent, and he wanted to create the illusion of reform, like in many other cases before, with prosecutorial reform, with police reform. So in this case, he didn't even achieve that. He didn't even create an illusion, because most observers realized that this Supreme Court is compromised, tainted, and it's not even superficially good. They didn't even make symbolic concessions by not appointing some of the most controversial and corrupt judges.
And so one interesting thing we also saw him do this week was he supported a tougher version of an anti-corruption court than people expected him to do. One, do you think that was, that he's really going to follow through on that? And let's say hypothetically he does. With the existing reforms that have gone through, would the sabotage of those reforms nullify any use of the anti-corruption court?
Basically, Poroshenko, for more than a year, he has resisted the creation of a real, independent anti-corruption court recruited through a transparent and independent process with the participation of foreigners. And his allies, like Alexeyev, an MP, pushed for another concept, anti-corruption chambers, which would be controlled by Poroshenko and would presumably be the same corrupt old judges, but just renamed to anti-corruption judges. But now, when there is more and more pressure on this anti-corruption court from the West and from civil society, and when the Venice Commission is rumored to be preparing a conclusion that the civil society's version of the anti-corruption courts is preferable to Poroshenko's version. So now apparently Poroshenko is trying to kind of show that he supports public opinion and the West, but I think it's very likely to be just another ploy, because he has come up with various excuses, various ploys and techniques to delay and sabotage the creation of an anti-corruption court. What he says is basically meaningless. What matters is what he actually does. So now he hasn't done anything yet, so whatever he says, we will judge that by what he will do in the future. And he will only create a real independent anti-corruption court if there is very, very strong pressure on him, like mass protests or something like that. Otherwise, I think he'll resist it until the end.
Thanks for joining us, Oleg. Now, Olga Rudenko, an editor here at the Kyiv Post, joins us to discuss the recent pension reform legislation. So, Olga, what's changed for Ukrainians?
Hi, so this pension reform was in the works for a long time because basically the pension fund in Ukraine has a huge deficit because the ratio of people who are in the workforce and are paying the taxes is 1-to-1 with the pensioners who are being paid from the taxes. And so this huge deficit has been compensated with the means of the budget. And it just can't go on this way. We've just got this new pension bill. So the main purpose of the bill is to cut the deficit, and to do this they are trying to cut back on the early retirement. And as you may know, in Ukraine the retirement age is the second lowest in Europe. Set now at 60 for men and 58 for women, and even that is higher than it used to be just 5 years ago. So they're trying to cut back on the early retirement, but at the same time they are sort of offering a carrot by doing the immediate raise of the pensions because they're incredibly low in Ukraine now. The average pension is at $70 a month, and millions of people, by some accounts it's 8 million out of 12 million of pensioners live on as low as just under $50 a month.
So it's understood that this will raise pension amounts for people who are older. For people who are maybe younger, can they expect to get a sizable pension once they reach retirement age?
The thing is that the government is advertising this reform as something that is groundbreaking and is changing the amount of pensions so much, but in fact only some 10% of the pensioners will feel a sizable raise. The pensions may raise by as much as $1,000 a month, and it would bring them, like say the person is getting $50 and they'd be getting like $90, which is still not much. And this works for only 10% of them. Many will get raises as small as $20 a month or even $2. So while the government is trying to advertise it as a big deal and a huge change for the pensioners, we are still going to have prevalent old age poverty even after this law.
Can you speak to why this was such a priority for the IMF?
The thing with IMF is that they haven't yet reacted to the law, and we know that they wanted Ukraine to actually raise the retirement age. But the thing is that the government decided to do it a bit differently. They are not raising retirement age, but they are raising the amount of years that a person needs to put into the pension system, like the working years. And it's a big change. Right now you can retire and get your pension if you only work for 15 years. And it's gonna change. It's now 25 starting next year, and they're gonna add 1 year annually, and then by 2028 it's gonna be 35 years. You are required to work 35 years to get a retirement pension. But it delays this positive effect on the budget, and as the government is offering this carrot by immediately raising the pension, the budget is going to take the immediate negative effect. So we don't know if the IMF is going to be content with that.
And can you speak at all to what the public reaction has been to the passage of this bill? I mean, is anybody expecting to survive off their pension, or are people kind of disappointed with it, or what?
I do know that a lot of old people who are living below the poverty line now, they are really counting on it. But it will work only for the people who are older than 70 now, so the ones who retired a long time ago, because the main change is that they change the way that the pensions are calculated. The pensions, the size of the pension is linked to what the person used to make in salary, and the person retired 10 years if the salary was very small comparing to today's salary. The new law basically links the pension to the current average salary, and the government is really winning from that. The Prime Minister Vladimir Hrostman, he's been heavily advertising it and speaking a lot about how big a difference it will make, like how it will finally bring a decent way of living to the pensioners. And when you think about it, you have to keep in mind that the election is coming in 2 years, both to parliament and presidential.
Thanks for joining, Olga. Now, last but not least, Kyiv's changing Bessarabky Market. Lifestyle reporter Anna Yakutenko joins us with the story. Thank you for joining us, Anna. Anna is also the producer of the show, and so it's not a long way for her to come. So tell us, why and when was Bessarabky first built?
So actually Bessarabky was built in 19th century. If we are talking about the market itself, It used to be founded as just a street market where people gathered to sell the products. It was very comfortable to them because the market was located near the densely populated districts of Kyiv, and also it was very comfortable for them to take the carriage and bring all those products to the market. However, the market wasn't really a nice place. While the rest of the Kyiv was already very European-like looking and modern, the market was really a horrible place with no sanitary. So it wasn't really a nice place for the city. And afterwards, one multimillionaire and philanthropist, Lazar Brodsky, he actually put the money for a market in testimony, and the city finally built this covered market at Bessarabka.
What function did it serve during the Soviet Union?
The relations between the market and Bolsheviks were also very interesting, because actually the market had a very modern refrigerator in the basement. And it turned out that in times of Holodomor, it was sort of like a morgue for a people. So Holodomor, it's orchestrated by Stalin famine that took away around 10 million lives in Ukraine in 1930-33. And during that time, people who were just starving, and they were brought in this Bessarabka market fridge, and then people sent those bodies to other morgue.
Now it's been turned into a hip eating spot. How has that happened, and why?
So the place was very popular among people even during Soviet times. Actually, Bessarabka Market was the one famous for the large variety goods at high prices. So usually, rich people went to this market, but people with not so high incomes also could come there and buy something from the market that were on the street near Bessarabka, and now, several years ago, it became a very popular spot for people to open their cafes, and there are several vegan places, Vietnamese cuisine, noodles, all the variety of interesting cuisines, and even the YES conference, Yalta European Conference, had its opening party this year at the market. So it's sort of very popular spot among Kievans.
So it's retained its elite status. Thank you for joining us on Yakutenko. Thank you for joining us. This is the Kyiv Post podcast.